there, everyone. Joshua Short with you. We are in our hear me okay? Yes, you guys can. Joshua Short here in South Bend. We are awaiting a news conference which is expected to start any moment now. This is in South Bend. Portage Township trustee Jason Critchlow. He and his team announcing today that there's going to be a settlement agreement with Karl King Tower. There's a little bit more of a background to this, which I will dive into here momentarily. I just want to make sure they aren't talking, and it sounds like they are not at this moment, so that is obviously important. I don't want to interrupt anything they're going to say here, but obviously, you know, Karl King Tower has been at the center of a lot of controversy with its heating issues and a myriad of other issues we've been reporting on. So let's listen in. It looks like Jason Critchlow just sat down. We're going to learn a little bit more information here momentarily.
Okay. Sorry. Let us know when you guys are ready. So here to follow up on the situation at Karl King, and appreciate your guys' engagement on this and that you've been following the story and what's been going on there, and you know, speaking out for those residents and making sure that their concerns have been heard here, and they've certainly been heard by this office, as you know. Backing up, this office received lots of complaints about the fact that the heat in the building was off, not being provided through these last couple of months, starting about mid-December and going until about mid-January. So we started an investigation, confirmed that this was the case, started having conversations with property managers and owners. We reached out to the Attorney General's office, got them involved. So we've been having ongoing discussions over these last several weeks with the ownership of Karl King Towers and the property owners of Karl King. And so as a consequence of those discussions, we are happy to announce today that we, as you know, we sent a demand letter to those owners as well. We asked for several stipulations be met, otherwise the township would start to pursue litigation against the owners of Karl King. And what we're happy, I guess, to announce today is they agreed to essentially all of the demands that we made in that letter. And so that's what we are going to be talking about here today, and that's what you have all in your hands there, is this agreement that we were able to negotiate with them. So I'm just going to go through some of the key provisions of this agreement. But before I do, just a word about the Attorney General's office. This has been done also in conjunction with them, but this is between the township and the owners of Karl King. The Attorney General's investigation is sort of separate and ancillary to that, and Alex can probably answer more questions about that. By the way, Alex Bowman, Township Counsel here. Their investigation is sort of separate to this. However, they've indicated to us that they believe this will likely be used as a resolution to that investigation as well. And again, Alex can talk about what some of those, what that looks like from the Attorney General's standpoint, at least from a legal standpoint. So, but one thing that we can talk about here is what the provisions are of this agreement. So first of all, rent credit for the affected tenants. They have agreed to provide a 20% rent credit that will be applied to every single tenant in the building. So all 220 tenants will receive a 20% credit on their rent on their March rent statement. Obviously, in every case, we wish this could be more, but this was what we thought we could find, which would be mutually agreeable to under the considerations of what occurred here. They are to certify with the township by April 1st that rent credit has been applied. Obviously, we will hear after this if it hasn't been. And then importantly, they are agreeing to a 3-year self-monitoring and mandatory compliance and reporting period with Portage Township. So for the next 3 years, the ownership must report any health or safety issues that affect the entire building or 50% or more of the tenants within 72 hours of that happening. They have to include whatever their plans are, their timelines, and corrective actions are for whatever that particular incident. Now, why this is important is later on you see in here, this also includes the ability for the township to inspect. So the township can do an unannounced inspection if we get reports that there are conditions that exist within the building that might fit the criteria in here. And so, you know, we think that's really important because not only were we looking for resolution to the issue here, but how do we prevent this from happening in the future? And so that's a really important part of this from our standpoint. grateful that the owners agreed to that. So we'll be allowed to review maintenance logs, invoicing, billing, all of these types of things as well. As a condition of all this, the township is waiving its claims to, if you recall, we requested restitution directly to the township because township assistance funds have gone to that building. Well, in exchange for them increasing the restitution that would be applied directly to the residents, we went ahead and waived those claims. So then the enforcement of this is if they fail to do any of these things in the event of a default, they basically have 10 days to let us know, give us written notice that they're defaulting on this for some reason. Otherwise, we kind of go back to where we were on the pursuit of whatever legal avenues are available to us. In conjunction with this, some of the updates that they have provided us is they have made staffing changes at the building or continuing to make staffing changes at the building. They're going to be hiring a new security firm. We know that's a big deal. Actually, just this morning, I had a conversation with the owners because if you guys were following the scanner traffic last night, there were some major incidents in the building last night. I communicated those with the owners, and I said, we'd like to hear some more details on what the security looks like, and they're going to come back to me with that. But as of now, we just know they are planning additional security in the building and replacing the company that they had there. They have put together a capital improvement plan as well. They haven't sent that over to us yet. Right now, half of the boilers in the building have been replaced. It's a 12-boiler system. 6 of them have been replaced. They do have plans to replace the other 6 this summer. So that's something that we're going to be discussing with them as we move along here, but it's about another $250,000 investment that they're saying they're going to put into the boiler system on top of the, nearly $250,000 that they put into the current boilers that have been replaced. They also have committed to taking steps towards we really want to start establishing a better relationship between the tenants and the owners of this building, and they're going to have to start doing a lot of things to establish trust. The owners acknowledge that that was a problem, and they're already workshopping what some of those solutions might be, including providing a hotline and or an email that will bypass the property managers that tenants can use to communicate directly with the owners. So, we're imagining some sort of email address where it's like, hey, I've been taking these issues to these property owner management folks on the ground. They're doing nothing about it. You can send an email to this email address, and that will go directly towards the ownership. They also acknowledge the elevator issues. They've got a contractor that they've been using. They did put an investment into the elevator system, but the contractor that they're using is out of town. So when issues come up with the elevators, it's creating a major delay in the repair of those elevators. So those conversations will continue to be ongoing. That's also a Department of Homeland Security issue. So those are some folks that will be brought into that as necessary. But that's the nuts and bolts of where we arrived here today. And we think it's important because, again, it does introduce, it provides some relief to the residents for kind of what they went through over these last several weeks when it came to not having heat in the building. But really, we want to introduce a measure of accountability moving forward, and we think that this agreement is definitely a step in that direction. So there's a lot of folks out there, even myself included, that would like to see a lot more. But again, we fall back on the laws of the state of Indiana, really hamstring local governments in this space. So if anybody knows me, I'm always happy to push that envelope and push those lines as far as we can push them. And I think that we did that here, and we were able to do that successfully. So again, it's not a perfect resolution in a lot of people's minds, no doubt, but it's definitely a significant step forward. We've already communicated this directly with some of those residents, and we have heard a lot of words of appreciation. They just appreciate that folks seem to care about this issue when they feel like nobody has cared for so long. So that's kind of what I got for you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
This seems to be a bit of a win for your office. You were able to get in touch with these owners and get them to agree. How difficult a process was that to actually get them to engage, and how much of a win is this?
Getting them to engage wasn't terribly difficult, I guess I would say. I think getting them to realize how major of a problem this was probably the heavier lift. I don't know, very often, and Alex can tell you, in the conversations we would say to them, I'm not sure you're getting the correct information from your people here on the ground. And I think there was a real disconnect with whoever they were talking to on the ground with what the actual conditions were in the building. So unfortunately, I should say fortunately, the residents who contacted this office provided us with documentation, provided us with videos and pictures. It was very helpful because I was able to put that literally under the nose of management and say, here is an individual who works for you who is literally screaming at tenants in the lobby. Is this the type of operation that you're running? And I think once we were able to do that, I think the dynamic shifted quite a bit, and I found them to be as reasonable as I think you could be in this situation. Now, What's the future look like? Well, I think that's where we're all going to have to play a role in ensuring accountability. The city's going to have to play a role in that as well. But it was definitely some time, and I really appreciate Alex's work on this. And he's a great legal mind, and he understands these issues very well. He understands our limitations very well, and so I think a lot of credit goes to him on being able to communicate clearly with these owners on what we needed to have happen here.
How many meetings were had between property owners, you guys, and the township?
Lots of emails, but probably a dozen meetings, a dozen conversations.
And then does the property owners own any other properties around the U.S., Midwest, or just Karl King Towers here in South Bend?
From what I understand, they own quite a few properties, and they at least did recently own Beacon Heights here in South Bend. I don't know if that's changed, but the last time I looked, which was a few weeks ago, that they were the owners of Beacon Heights as well.
Can you share what company that is?
Who is the actual owner?
The actual owner is probably a special purpose entity. So for Karl King, the owner is Karl King Holdings LLC, and this is probably their only real estate holding. But the management company is Treetop Management. Treetop Companies.
It's all under the umbrella of Treetop Companies.
So one of the issues that we've highlighted is the fact that tenants don't feel safe complaining, speaking to the public, speaking to us in the news. Of course, they've come to you and you've advocated on their behalf. And now there seems to be this email, they can go straight to the property managers, go over the on-site management's head. I know that I did hear back from Treetop Companies before my piece aired on Monday, and they said that they vehemently deny any claims that residents are being threatened with eviction. That's not what we're hearing on the ground. It's not what you're hearing. I don't know if you want to address that.
I discussed that with them. We discussed, and I'll tell you the truth, it is not uncommon to see a level of fear among folks who are living like this, folks who are on limited incomes, that they know they have limited options. And I shared with the property owners that we've dealt with several apartment complexes, or even housing here in South Bend, and there's always a level of fear and intimidation. I've never seen the level of fear and intimidation that existed in this building, with people calling this office, bawling on the phone for 20 minutes, calling me, sending me messages, anonymous notes getting shoved into our door, and inevitably every single one of them said, please leave my name off of this. A lot of you wanted to speak with residents. I had a difficult time getting any of these residents to trust, and it's not about you. It's like, I was grateful that they put their trust in me and in this office, that they were able to come to us, but in the end, they didn't want their name associated because they had a level of fear of that, and I think a lot of that was because of the treatment they were receiving from the property manager. So was that getting communicated to those owners? From the owner's standpoint, that might be the case. It might be their position that we don't threaten people. It very well could be, but those conditions exist. That culture exists within the building, and it's unacceptable. So they have to start taking steps towards fixing that, because nobody should have to live, A, under these kind of conditions, but then B, under the type of fear that these people have on elevating those concerns to the people that they're paying their money to. These are folks with limited resources, and they're giving those limited resources to you in exchange for services. You have an absolute obligation to provide them with those services. And we see that all over the city in a lot of places. There is a lot of fear with folks, but there was I've never seen it this bad as it was in this building.
So jumping off that point, you talked about staffing changes a little bit. Are the people who are intimidating other residents, can you say if they're being removed?
So that's what we were pushing for. I mean, we very clearly explained to them who we thought were the issues in this building and what we thought those issues were. And if they want to see true culture change, those are the kind of changes that needed to be made. I didn't get a confirmation on exactly what that looked like, just that they were taking that seriously. They did make a change. They confirmed that they made a change with the security company because they felt obviously they weren't getting the type of service they needed from them. And I would agree, even situations that happened last night, what's going on in that building, that these issues are, it's 220 people. It is difficult to control, a building of 220 people, but plenty of folks do it. So you got to hire the right folks that are going to come in there and take it seriously and protect the safety of a lot of these residents. These residents are living in fear. Some of them don't leave their apartment. It's terrible. They don't leave their apartment for fear of being accosted by somebody in the stairwell, or for fear of not being able to get back into their apartment because the elevator's not working. So you throw in a lack of heat, you throw in a lack of utilities. I mean, it's inhumane.
Right, and a follow-up question, you mentioned that Skinner traffic, something about security last night. Can you tell us a little more of what you heard?
I'm referencing, I've got, as you can imagine, I got lots of messages from residents in Karl King saying, that there was, a major police incident last night there. I don't really know all the details except what the scanner traffic said and what the residents told me, but there was a disturbance in the building last night. There was a major police response. Sounds like there was a chase through the hallway, but we've gotten reports of prostitution, we've gotten reports of drug dealing, we've gotten reports of a lot of nasty things that a few specific concrete steps can be taken to prevent that sort of activity in there. But again, we need a culture change. We need a culture change across South Bend, that this sort of thing is unacceptable and that residents deserve better.
How are we going to enforce this new security firm? It's great that they're changing, but even on Sunday when I drove by the building, there was like a glove that was propping open that side door.
Yeah.
And even on Sunday there was an empty SBPD squad car there, but there was still that door propped open. So that was after they had told me they've got this new security firm. Is this going to be enough? How are we going to make sure?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question. It's just going to take vigilance on all our parts, unfortunately. And it's funny you say that because the owners would be very quick to tell you, like, Jason, it's 200 people in the building. Like, we can't control what everyone does. And you're right. Now, I have seen communications in February come out from the management of the building telling residents that they will be evicted if they do X, Y, Z. If they are propping doors open, if they're allowing undesirables in the building, that they will take steps to fix that. So I do believe they are serious in their attempts to try to address this. I think it's just going to be on all of us. And, and I actually said I was very grateful that we had the open dialogue that we had with the owners, because I told them, as of this morning, I sent them an email. It must have been 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, I got an email back from them, and it was about what happened last night and, with a commitment to follow up. So I'm going to hold them. I want to put some faith and trust into them and their word here now that they know that this is a thing, and they don't want to be bothered by us, and they certainly don't want this kind of bad publicity for them, and we don't want to rake them over the coals unnecessarily. And so I think it's just going to be that matter of us continuing to provide that dialogue with them.
You talked about the monitoring and things that are coming out of this, kind of your demand letter and all that. Is this similar to Cedar Glen's monitoring that happened in 2024 when they were without utilities and all of that?
This one does seem a little bit different, and Alex might be able to provide a little bit of those differences. That one has been filed in Marion County Superior Court, and so what Cedar Glen folks need to do is, if they're having major outages and that are prolonged and affecting entire buildings, they need to be reaching directly out to the Attorney General's office for those. So this one is slightly different. Is there any other differences, Alex?
Other than the Cedar Glen arrangement, like Jason said, that's a voluntary compliance agreement that's in conjunction with the Attorney General's office. So the township isn't, it's not a contract per se. The township isn't a party to that, whereas the voluntary compliance agreement that Karl King has entered into with the township is just between those two parties. And so I think probably one of the big differences is one, the reporting requirement, but then also some of the inspection authority that the township has been granted as a matter of contract in order to investigate claims as they may arise.
And that's where I was going to land as well. That ability to inspect, that ability to come in and say, hey, look, I need to come in here and take a look at things. We need to send our property inspector in there to take a look at what's going on without a complaint, without somebody calling in 311, without somebody calling this office and applying for assistance. That is actually an avenue that did not exist before.
And then what does this settlement mean for holding landlords and property owners accountable for you guys?
Well, same with Cedar Glen. I think that what we keep telling ourselves is that we're hoping everybody else is sitting up and taking notice that we're going to be loud about this, but we're going to squawk about this, that when this happens, we're not going to leave you alone until it gets fixed. And I think we have a culture that exists within our community that folks are just, they know it's going to be, it's going to go away, it'll be brushed over. I think we're going to have to continue to shine a light on this because it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So we're hoping that any other property owners in the area that might be using unscrupulous practices or not taking their role seriously is starting to take notice that you don't want this kind of heat, you don't want this kind of attention. Please just take those regular, normal, reasonable steps towards protecting your residents and providing the services that you're required to provide.
And you are, constantly telling us that the law doesn't provide for more. So what would be legislation you think that would be necessary to help even further in this case? Would it be the escrow account? Would it be rent control? What are the kind of policies that would help that Indiana doesn't have?
Yeah, I'll let Alex kind of answer some of this too, but I think anything you can do to provide your local governments with more tools to hold people accountable is going to be helpful in general. There's probably lots of different ways that you can do that, but that's a major one. I mean, sometimes folks, it's like you take it as far as you can go, and then you have to that's all you're legally allowed to do. So whatever they can do. In fact, when my first conversation with the Deputy Attorney General that we've been working with on these 2 years ago, I remember specifically him saying, Jason, we want, because we didn't really know, we kind of just dove through that one, but he said, no, we want you guys. We want local governments. We need local agencies taking the lead to that. It's one office up here. We only have a handful of people. It's the entire state of Indiana. So from the Attorney General's office perspective, the feeling we've always gotten is they want you to lead the charge, and then they're happy to help you with that. But we really need to be empowering residents. We need to be passing laws in Indiana that provide tools to residents to actually, everybody says, well, they should just all get together and file a class action lawsuit. So it's, people say that kind of thing, and unfortunately they're well-meaning, but it's brainless. I mean, it costs tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire attorneys, getting an attorney that's even willing to do that, organize everybody to do it. Most of these folks that we're talking about here are regular working families or people of low economic means. They don't have the ability to do that. So I think it's the duty of elected officials and our state government to provide those protections for these people. One way you can do that is you can establish the escrow account system that other states have, where it's really heartbreaking. What I'll say is it's really heartbreaking when a resident comes to you and says, I haven't been provided heat for the last 3 months, Jason. I'm just not going to pay my rent until they do this. It is heartbreaking to have to look at that resident in the eye and say, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you need to pay your rent anyway. They can legally evict you if you don't pay your rent. And that is really tough to have to say to somebody. So what we need is the system here in Indiana where somebody under the oversight of the court can say, I'm not going to pay you my rent. I will pay it to this escrow account until you make these certain repairs to this building, to this shelter. That money will not be released to you. That is a system that exists in many states. We just don't have it here in Indiana. Other details around that you're aware of?
No, I think that pretty well encapsulates it. I mean, we keep in mind that the statutes that are in place and the statutes that implicated the township's role in this agreement are these habitability statutes, and that's really the baseline of what is to be provided to tenants under the law, and that's, it's heat, it's running water. I mean, it's things that we identify as really basic housing, and so as Jason said, having the tools both at the local government level and empowering residents to be able to advocate on their own behalf for, at the very least, this most basic level of housing is something that we desperately need. Now the policy prescriptions for that are going to be varied and complex, and we certainly could put together a treatise on it. But suffice to say, there's more that needs to be done.
What's funny too, because you talk a lot of when we talk infestation, right? We talk about bed bugs. That's a big problem in this building, right? A lot of folks will say, well, that's the tenants that are bringing those bed bugs in there. That's the tenants. It's not the ownership's fault that they're bringing bed bugs in here and not doing the things they need to. And that could be true in some scenarios, but once an infestation gets so bad that they're crawling all over the halls, they're in the elevator there, and you see that in buildings like the Karl King, how can you say it's, I just moved into this building, it's not my fault this place is infested? Like, it's even things like that. You can get that specific. Empower our local health departments to be able to take actions here. And also another rumor that I'd like to, sort of myth that, everybody comes in and they're like, Jason, you just need to condemn the building. Condemn the building. Everybody just needs to be torn down, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, there's 220 residents in this building. We're in a housing crisis already. We have a supply problem when it comes to affordable housing. What do you mean, condemn the building? I mean, it really does put you in a hard spot from a local government perspective. Where are these folks going to go?
Speaking directly to residents now, do you truly believe this agreement is going to work, and when will the residents see the impact of these protections?
I think we have to define success, right? Is it going to work in itself? No. It's a step forward, and we need lots of steps forward. We need people taking this seriously. We need policy change. We need culture change. So is this the end-all, be-all? No, absolutely not. But you have a part to play in this, and I say that all the time. You can't, if you're not being provided heat or hot water by your landlord, posting on Facebook about it might make you feel better, but it's not going to lead to any results. Running to the media about it might make you feel better, but it's not going to, it's not going to create any results. You've got to file a complaint. You've got to call 311. You have got to let the city know, because that is what starts off a chain of legal events that can provide you with some relief. And that's a big one. A lot of folks, it's very frustrating to me. They'll send me a message on Facebook. I'll say, okay, go ahead and call 311 or do this, and they'll, well, I don't want to do that. Well, you got to, And so for the message to tenants is you have to be brave, and you've got to file a complaint when you're not being provided these resources. There are folks like myself that will do whatever we can to protect you. We will file it anonymously on your behalf if it comes to that, but you've got to reach out to the proper people and make them know about it.
And Jason, on that note, you talk about calling 311. Do you believe that the city of South Bend is doing enough to work on these problems?
What she's trying to put me into now. I think we can always be doing more.
Another question. Can you tell me how this inspection authority will work? You don't need a complaint. You're able to go in the building. What will it take for you to say, all right, it's time, we're going to go do an inspection?
Yeah, I think practically speaking, it's a great question. So if I come into the office on a Monday and I've got 4 messages from Karl King residents that say, we haven't had heat all weekend, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to make a phone call. And if that phone call doesn't get returned and I'm not getting an answer, maybe it's right down the street. Maybe I walk down there. Maybe I ask our property inspector to go down there and take a look. It can be that simple. And that's why I think this is really nice. And, there's a lot of different ways it can go after that, but the fact that we can just go ahead and say, hey, I've got reason to suspect, and I'm not going to just dream it up. We've got lots of things to do in this office that keep us busy. But if I've had several residents that have called and said, my hot water hasn't been working for a week, well, we're going to go down there and take a peek. And if they say, yes, but we actually fixed it, I can actually say, okay, can you show me those records? Or if they say, yes, but we're working on it, I can say, can you show me your plan? So it's great from that perspective that it gives us that ability to even go in and ask those questions.
How are residents being notified of this and these kind of protections that are coming out?
Thank you for asking, because I meant to say that earlier. We actually are, I imagine that Karl King plans a communication. They've been planning a communication with the residents. We're actually going to be communicating with the residents. We're going to be sending a letter to all the residents out there. The ones who call here we'll talk to directly, but we're planning to communicate directly with those residents. Hopefully they're going to hear about it after they see your reporting.
And then you talked about how you guys will waive the rights, you'll waive the restitution claims to the township once there's verification that the rent claims have been fulfilled. Can you talk about your reasonings behind that and all of that?
I mean, in the end, we just want the resident. It's important to us that the residents get as much money back that they can. I mean, it was not about this office. I mean, I think the taxpayers of South Bend will support the idea that these folks deserve to get as much of their rent back for this that they can. So we think that it's a very moral and ethical position to take, that we wanted to maximize the amount of restitution that the residents themselves got. 220 is a lot of people.
And this is a different situation than Cedar Glen. However, and not to come off as harsh, there have been just commentary that maybe that self-reporting period of monitoring and compliance isn't doing enough. So this is a different scenario, but I guess what reassurances are that this will actually be effective and that the owners will actually be reporting?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to be the carrot and less the stick, usually. Usually we're folks that are providing assistance, we're helping people cover rent, so it's one of those, if you're a landlord, you want to have a good relationship with this office because we're helping provide money to keep these people, in here when they would otherwise have to leave. So that code enforcement piece is the stick. I'd love to see, again, I mean, we could take this all the way. We could let this go 12 months, 18 months, and spend tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars on legal fees to try to provide some sort of better outcome here when it comes to accountability. But that's a huge risk because, again, the laws of Indiana, I mean, we'd really having to dance on that one. And so, unfortunately, those are the decisions that have to be made. Let's take this as far as we think we can reasonably go. Because in the end, it's about these residents. The number one priority was getting the heat back on as fast as possible. The number two priority is making sure this doesn't happen again. So we've kind of settled on number one. Now we're working on number two. Oh, you guys were like, good questions.
Anything else I'm missing?
No, that was great. I mean, hopefully we don't have to do this again. Not for Karl King.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Aaron Brockovich over here. You know who that is? She don't know who that is.
Aaron Brockovich. It's on my list on Netflix. I haven't seen it.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It is a good one.
And that's where we end things, talking about Aaron Brockovich. We welcome you back inside of our newsroom here in South Bend. Joshua Short with you. You just heard a 30-minute news conference loaded with a lot of information for a lot of our viewers right now. If you live, especially if you live in Karl King Tower in South Bend, Indiana, something that our team has been following for months, especially the last several months, as it has to do with heating issues at that complex during a very, very bitter cold stretch here in Michiana. We are hearing from that team, folks, the trustee's office here in Portage Township, which is where that building sits. And obviously there's a lot to talk about and a lot of layers to pull back. And so obviously one thing that I want to make sure that we're aware of is exactly what does this mean for you. So we're going to go right back to the beginning of all this for those of you who just joined us and did not hear every detail that was mentioned in that news conference. I want to make sure that you all get that and get that information properly. So let's start with this initial complaint. For those who do not remember, we've done this reporting as well. There were complaints from a lot of residents. You heard 220 residents live at the Karl King Tower in South Bend, near downtown South Bend, about heating issues. These heating issues, we're not talking about on and off heat here. We're talking about people who have not had heat for long periods of time. Our team doing some dogged reporting about that over the span of several weeks and a few months about people who have complained about being cold and what was frigid temperatures. Obviously, if you're here in South Bend right now, it's hard to believe that we're almost in the 60s. That was not the case a month ago, several weeks ago, right? And so you're talking about the temperatures that were experienced by so many people who did not have heat. They had to use space heaters, and they started to ask questions. Can I pay my rent? Do I have to pay my rent? They were asking our newsroom these questions. And so we began to do these series of reports that talked about this. And then not long after the reporting is when we saw some action. And so we saw Jason Critchlow and his team with the Portage Township. They decided to issue a formal complaint. That formal complaint saying, hey, we're going to issue this demand letter. And what this demand letter asked is for basically a list of things. Heating was the priority. You heard the other stuff about the bed bugs. You heard about the security concerns. But the priority here was about heating issues. That led to a series of other events legally, right? You heard him talk about at the end of that news conference. You know, you can come to the media all you want as a tenant. You can go to them all you want as a tenant, but you've got to file an official complaint because that sets off a series of legal pursuits that then must be acted on in some way, shape, or form by the state. And as we know, the Attorney General's office is also looking into this as well. They have a separate investigation, but this is part of that. They are aware of this demand letter that was issued. We can tell you that this formal settlement that has been reached, there are a lot of tenets to that. There are a lot of bullet points, and that's what I want to reach back into this bag and kind of run through if I can. So first off, and this is a big deal, 20% rent credit for the 220 residents here. That's huge. 220 units occupied during this outage period, so to speak. That credit will be applied to the March 2026 rent with certification to the township due by April. And so they're not just saying they're going to do something. They are making sure that they are trying to enforce this as best they can, right? And doing so in the best way and the quickest way possible. So the 20% rent credit is for all of those affected tenants. And again, 220 tenants in all affected by this. There's a 3-year self-monitoring and mandatory reporting aspect to this. The owner must basically report any health or safety issue that arises affecting the entire building or 50% or more of tenants. They have to do this within 72 hours. That's a little bit controversial, and I want to underscore why, because you talk about down the road at Cedar Glen, which we've also done reporting on, which the AG's office is also looking into because of similar issues there, especially with safety. A lot of people say, well, how do you enforce that? That's self-reporting. How do you enforce that? And what are the enforcement regulations if they don't report, right? Self-report in this case. And so that was something that you heard Jason Critchlow address as well there. But that is huge. A 3-year self-monitoring and mandatory reporting from the owners themselves. And it has to do, again, with the safety issues there. And this is, again, affecting the entire building or 50% of the tenants. And so that is an expectation that as part of this agreement, as part of this formal settlement, must be reached by the owners. Another thing that got my attention on this, you got the Township Inspection Authority. That's important as well. But the conditional waiver of restitution claims. Upon verification that rent credits have been issued in full, the township will waive restitution claims related to emergency housing assistance provided during the outage. And so basically you heard him talk about it at the end there. They want to get back as much money as possible to these tenants who were without heat for so long during that bitter cold snap that we had here in South Bend. So that's what that is talking about there. And then you get some of the enforcement and remedies, and it goes on into detail. I do want to mention a few other things here. He talked about a major police incident that happened last night. We are still trying to figure out exactly what that was. He says here that there were some reports to his office that there was some type of police situation there, potentially a chase down a hallway involving a wanted person or people. We're still trying to get more information on that disturbance and what that meant for people who were living inside of the apartments and how long that situation went and obviously the outcome of that. So we're going to be asking those questions. He said something here. We need a culture change. I wrote that down. He said, quote, "We need a culture change in this city." Obviously, we've not done just one story on this apartment complex, let alone the other stories, the litany of stories we've done about several other apartment complexes and ownership issues when it comes to problems faced by tenants. I mean, we've done several reports on that. This is not the only housing complex, apartment complex in this city that the state is investigating. The AG's office is looking into. And so that is important, right? That is something to keep in mind. And that is why he said there, we need a culture change. I want to reiterate this, and I just kind of mentioned this a few seconds ago. If you are a tenant at Karl King, Cedar Glen, wherever it may be, and you have prolonged, consistent issues, whether it be with heating, water issues, or safety issues of any kind, health issues, or whatever similar there may be, please make sure you file a complaint, because that sets off a legal process that must be addressed, and owners have to respond to that. You can go on Facebook all you want. That helps us as reporters to understand and get the story. And obviously, us telling the story helps bring attention to these issues. But you also need to make sure that you file a complaint, because legally that is the form of recourse that you have in a state where you talk about the laws here. You heard Jason Critchlow talk about the laws here and who they favor in terms of the ownership groups and the ownership companies and the LLCs and the apartment complexes. You want to make sure that you have that done so that you have a recourse in this case. The only other thing I want to mention here, quote, "I think we can always do more." That was the response from Jason Critchlow to a question in the room from a journalist to him about what do you think the city of South Bend needs to do more of. And he said, quote, "I think we can always do more." Obviously, that is a direct point to the city officials, the mayor as well. We have gone to the mayor's office several times about issues like this, and we've done that reporting, and you can see that at WNDU.com. But again, this is an issue that has been persistent, and you know, you can connect dots all you want, but sometimes there's a huge dot, and in this case, there was a big dot, not just with Karl King, but with Cedar Glen and several other apartment complexes as well in our area. And so that's why this story is important. We want to make sure that you at home understand that you do have a legal recourse in this, regardless of what the state can do and does, and regardless of what the bylaws look like in favor of one entity or another. You do have legal recourse that you must take. And, you know, necessarily being on Facebook is not one of them, although that helps us understand the severity of some of these issues, because obviously, as reporters, we look on Facebook just like you do, and we can see what all of you see. And so that is very, very, very important. My news director is yelling, so forgive us in advance for that. You hear it in the background. We are all excited on this Thursday, obviously. So Wednesday. So one thing I think this is very important, and I'll leave you with this. The one thing that was in our news, we have these news meetings every morning, just to peel back the layers in the curtain if you want. We have these news meetings every morning about story ideas, potentially what we want to pursue and what we want to follow. As reporters, we have a job to do, and our job is to make sure that we advocate for you at home. And that is why we have our team of reporters here who do a pretty dang good job of making sure that you're heard. But the importance of this story and others like it is to ensure that you know at home that if you know that you don't have heat, that is not a luxury. That is a right. Now, obviously, that does not mean if you do not have heat, you cannot pay your rent. You have to do that legally, right? Because you can be evicted legally as well. George, make sure you get that, brother. You want to make sure that you have the legal recourse as well with that. You want to supplement that. Everything that you're going through at home or your friend may be going through, please let them know. Call 311. Call the township and make sure that they're aware as well. And then make sure that you're doing what you need to do to have that legal process started so that you have that paper trail. I just want to reiterate that because that's something a lot of people don't know. I think that they think they could just come to the news media, and that is important because we tell that story. And we want to continue to tell that story and bring attention to this. But at the end of the day, if you get a call from your town, if you get a call from the township, or in this case, the apartment complex, and they don't see your name or they don't see that you've made a documentation about all the issues, whether it be health issues or in this case, heating issues, that is going to be pivotal, critical in you getting some solution to whatever problem it is that you are facing. So we want to make sure that we put that out there once more. Obviously, we're going to have a full breakdown on this here on Channel 16 throughout the day. That is something that we want to make sure you're aware of as well. But again, you heard it there. Big deal, big settlement, a monumental settlement, as it has been said by Jason Critchell here, of this agreement, this agreement with Karl King Tower, LLC, the ownership group. We're hoping we don't have to do too many more of these stories, but we also know that there is a true reality out there that a lot of people are still going through issues right now when it comes to safety issues and health issues, and in this case, heating issues. And that's why this story is important to us, and it will remain important until everyone finds that solution. But the big nugget out of all of this, out of all the bullet points that I read, is this. You're seeing it at the bottom of your screen. That 20% rent credit to all impacted residents, and we're talking 220. And that's one of the big issues that he mentioned there. A lot of people say condemn the building. You hear that a lot. Condemn the building, shut down the building. You got 220 people who live there, right? Many of them can't afford to move. That's just the reality of it. And so that's why a story like this is important, because a lot of those residents, they need that recourse. They need that solution because there is no other alternative. And so legally, this is the biggest update that we've gotten involving our storytelling, our weeks, months of storytelling surrounding Karl King Tower, Karl King apartment complex in South Bend. We're going to have the very latest on this story tonight, starting at 5 o'clock on Channel 16. We usually have a 4 o'clock show, but that is not. I'm going to start our news coverage today because of the Olympics. And so we will start things at around 5 o'clock today. We'll also have a full wrap up for you in a news article on WNDU.com. That should be published soon. If it's not already, you will see it very soon on WNDU.com as well. That is a very latest from this news conference here in South Bend. Joshua Short signing off for our newsroom. We will see you soon.